In this video, I want to be talking about the rotator cuff and most importantly, the 4 things that you need to do to help your rotator cuff. So let's go. Thanks for checking out the channel. My name's John. I'm the head therapist at John W Sports Injury. Here at this channel, we want to do 3 simple things. We want to help you to understand your body, to remove any pain, to ultimately achieve your health, wellness and fitness goals. So if this sounds like some stuff that you want to be seeing more of, make sure you hit that subscribe button. So let's talk about the rotator cuff. Firstly, what is the rotator cuff? Because it's a term that I hear spoken to me a lot about in clinic, but when I ask people what perhaps it actually is, sometimes it's misunderstood. Now, the rotator cuff is the collective name for 4 muscles. So firstly, we've got the supraspinatus, which is the muscle that sits on top of the shoulder. We've got the subscapularis, which is the muscle that sits beneath our chest muscles and our pec muscles. Then we've got the infraspinatus and the teres minor that live on the back of the shoulder. Now, it's important to understand that these are deep muscles and they have a role of stabilizing the shoulder joint. Now, the shoulder joint is made up of what we term a ball and socket joint. So we have the ball, which is the top of the arm bone, if you like, that lives then into a socket, which is the bit on our shoulder blade. Now, the big advantage to a ball and socket joint is that it allows lots and lots of movement. So we can move the shoulder in lots of different directions, which is great. But the downside to the shoulder is that it then requires quite a lot of stability. And the shoulder isn't a joint that is renowned for having great stability, but its stability has a large part responsibility sits with the rotator cuff. So these 4 deep muscles are there to stabilize our shoulder joint during all these movements. So as a result, it's very common to develop some dysfunction in these muscles because they have a lot of responsibility, and that can result in a lot of pain. Typically pain that we might find when we lift our arm up to around 90 degrees and we start to feel that pinching sensation. That's how it can often begin, and then it can develop into conditions like rotator cuff tendinopathies, impingement syndromes, frozen shoulder and more. So I want to be talking about the 4 things that we need to do. And in fact, the 4th tip is probably the bit that I think is most missed or misunderstood. So make sure you hang around to the end of this video when I talk through that. But the 4 things we're going to talk about that you need to be thinking about for your rotator cuff is that you need to be stretching, you need to be rolling, you need to be strengthening, and you need to be stabilizing. They're the 4 things we're going to discuss in this video and just how you do those for your rotator cuff. So firstly, we need to stretch out that shoulder. We want to make sure that we have enough flexibility in those muscles of the rotator cuff. So a great way of doing that is by using something like a towel or a stick. And I often call this the over the shoulder stretch or the coat over the shoulder stretch. Because what you do is you pass the towel over one shoulder so that it's dangling down your back. Then with the other hand, you want to grab hold of that shoulder. And what you want to, over that shoulder of that towel, sorry. And then what you want to be doing is slowly pulling up on that towel. Now, as you start to pull up on that towel, you should start to feel the muscles in the back of the shoulder come under tension. A reminder that we want to be holding our static stretches for 30 seconds. Now, what we're doing here is stretching what we call the external rotators, so the muscles at the back. And they're the ones that have the tendency to become tight most commonly. But what we could also do then is we can also stretch the internal rotators or the subscapularis area by then pulling down on the towel. So doing the reverse of that stretch. And as we pull down, you'll now start to feel that stretch move to sort of the front top aspect of the shoulder. We're holding each of those stretches for 30 seconds. And then you could just simply take the towel or stick or whatever you're using onto the other side and repeat those stretches then for 30 seconds again. And what you should find over time is that you can start to increase that mobility around the shoulder. And you can be testing this by seeing how far up your back or down your back you could be reaching over a period of time. And that'll be showing you that that flexibility is improving. Then we've got flexibility in the shoulder muscles or the rotator cuff muscles. They're going to be less likely to have dysfunction and start to ease some of the pressure that they're placing upon that shoulder. The second thing that we want to be doing is rolling out of those rotator cuff muscles. And this is where my favorite friend, the lacrosse ball, comes into play. And what we particularly want to be doing is targeting those muscles of dysfunction in the back of the shoulder blade. So you can simply place the ball onto the floor. Lay yourself onto it, and then you can look to be slowly rolling through that area. Remember, what we want to be doing is finding those sore points with the lacrosse ball. So if you feel a change in tissue sensation towards almost like a painful type feeling, just hold on that area. Look, slow down your breathing, desensitize the tissue, and then you can be doing small movements in order to loosen out that area, if you like, and break down any of those adhesions. You can then repeat this process laying on top of the ball, and here now we're starting to work into those deeper chest muscles as we roll those through, repeating that process. The third tip in order to help your rotator cuff muscles is that we want to strengthen those areas of the shoulder. Now, what we can do here is look to take something like a light dumbbell and always begin very light. The muscles that we are going to be targeting are smaller, deeper muscles. So as a result, some of these movements might become quite difficult with weight lighter than you would expect. So start with the lightest weight. And what we want to be doing is sort of 3 sets of 12 repetitions of each exercise. And you should find when you've got the right weight that by repetitions 10, 11 and 12, you're starting to feel that almost that light burn is all we want to be feeling. And we want to be strengthening the shoulder into different directions. So the first exercise is what I call fronts, where we literally look to hold the weight down by our side and lift our arms straight forwards. Now, with all these exercises, I want to make a key point, and that is that we should be stabilizing the shoulder because we want to be firing those rotator cuff muscles. So as you go through each of the exercise, make sure that the shoulder remains stable. So as I mentioned, you simply want to lift the dumbbell straight up in front of you, aiming for around 90 degrees, perhaps just going slightly past 90 degrees. And then the key thing on the way down is keep it nice and slow and controlled, and then repeat that exercise. The next exercise is very similar. And this is what I call a sides exercise. So what we're looking to do is just take the movement out to the side. Now, what you might find here is that around 90 degrees, you might start to feel a pinching sensation, a catching if you've got any dysfunction. Don't go as far as this pain, and this is the same principle for all the exercises. Just go up to the point that you're comfortable going to and then bring it back down slowly. A reminder, we're looking to do 3 sets of 12 exercises. The next one is where we start to add in some functional rotational movements. What we want to do here is we want to place the elbow into our side against the ribs, and then we can hold that light weight, and you're looking to then rotate the arm out and back in, out and back in. Now, the key thing here, as I've mentioned, is that we want to keep the shoulder stable. So that elbow must remain in contact with the ribs in order to fire the different muscles. If you bring that elbow away from the ribs, you'll find that the exercise becomes a lot easier. And this is because you're using those larger mobilizing muscles. But by keeping the elbow fixed to the ribs, and sometimes I encourage people to put something like a pillow or a cushion in that area so that if you move the elbow away, that will drop and that will act as a stimulus. But by keeping the elbow into the ribs, the shoulder remains stable and you recruit those rotator cuff muscles. Now, the fourth of our strengthening exercises is perhaps the most difficult. I call these ups and downs. What we want to be doing is taking our arm out to the side so that the elbow ends up in line with the shoulder. Now, from here, we have to keep that shoulder still. And what we're looking to do is rotate the arm back and then rotate the arm down. So we're going through internal and external rotation of the shoulder, but without moving that shoulder. So we're recruiting those rotator cuff muscles. This is one of those exercises where it's really important that we're staying within that pain-free zone. It's a very difficult exercise to complete, and you might find that you can't bring your arm to that 90 degrees starting position. If that's the case, that's fine. Just keep going with the earlier exercises and build your way up to this exercise. But if you can get to there, even doing small movements will be really good to really be targeting that rotator cuff. And as you develop and you stretch the muscle, strengthen the muscle, improve the tissue quality, you'll find that that range of motion will increase, and therefore you'll be able to track your progress to prove that that rotator cuff is getting stronger. And so the fourth and final tip that I want to be talking about is one that I think is often missed, and why these rotator cuff issues can really reoccur. So good work for staying to the end, because I think this is one that you really want to take note of. And that's the stability aspect whilst putting the shoulder under pressure. Remember that this is what the rotator cuff is designed to be doing. So it makes sense that we need to be factoring this into our rehab. And one way that I do this is by doing what I call hand taps. Now, for this exercise, we can do this by starting off on our hands and knees. And all we want to simply be doing is lifting one hand, bringing it across to touch the other hand, and then returning it to its starting position. And then repeating that on the other side. Now, the side where you're moving the hand, this isn't the side that we're testing. We're actually testing the side that remains in contact with the ground, because as you lift that hand, we have a shift in our body weight in order that that arm that's in contact with the ground has to stabilize. So you want to be keeping that shoulder still. Now, you might find after completing this exercise that it's more difficult on one side than the other. That's telling you that you've got that weaker, more poorly recruiting rotator cuff on that side. So this is a great exercise in highlighting those imbalances and then hopefully removing them. But if that's easy for you to do 3 sets of 12, there's lots of ways that we can take this one exercise concept and make it more difficult. Firstly, you can slide those knees further back by increasing that base of support, or reducing that base of support, I should say, or increasing the distance. Then what we're looking to do here is provide a much bigger stability challenge for that shoulder. That's still easy. What we can look to do is take yourself up onto your toes into the high plank, top of press up position. And here you'll find a real test for the shoulders. This isn't one for the faint-hearted, but this will be really highlighting the true strength of those rotator cuffs. If that's got really easy for you and you really want to be testing yourself out and making sure that we're not going to get a return of any of these problematic rotator cuff pathologies, we can then look to do things like add a press up in between each rep of those hand taps. Or you can even put something like a pillow or a cushion underneath the hands to give yourself a balanced challenge. I hope that's been helpful. That's my 4 tips. Rotator cuffs are one of those things that we see every day in clinic, incredibly common and quite often misunderstood. So I want you to know that in order to fully restore your rotator cuff, you're going to need to stretch, strengthen, improve the tissue quality, and also make sure that you have the true stability capabilities of that rotator cuff. Have you got any other tips? Well, if you have, drop them in the comments below because I'd love to hear about them or answer any of your questions. And if you've made it this far, thank you very much. You've obviously liked the video, so smash that like button down below because that's telling me that you've made it to the end of this video and that this is the type of content that you want to be seeing. Here's another video to help you out on your fitness and well-being journey, and I'll see you on the next one.